I'm going to be explaining about the dbt_project.yaml file using an analogy. Suppose that you have to build a building. Now, to build this, you will be creating some rooms, you will be creating some floors, then you will have different sections, like you will have some office spaces in the building, then you might have some meeting rooms in the building. So there are lots of things in this particular building. But before you start building this thing, what is the first thing that you're going to do? You're going to create a blueprint, because that's how you will know how to build, where to build, what to do, etc. So that will help you in your planning. Similarly, when you are doing a DBT project, in DBT project, you're going to create models. Don't worry if you don't understand these terminologies, but I'm just going to give you an idea or an overview as to why this dbt_project.yaml file is important. So in this DBT project, you will build models, you will build test cases, you will create snapshots, you will have some seed files. So these are like the building blocks that you have in a building. So similarly for DBT project, these are the building blocks. Now, you're not just going to start building models straight away. You also need a blueprint. So in DBT project, the blueprint is defined in dbt_project.yaml file. Today we will be understanding what this particular file is, what are the things that are included in this file, so that whenever you're going to create your DBT project, you will be able to confidently start and plan the DBT project. If you're new here, then this is a DBT series where we are going to build a DBT project end to end, starting from data ingestion to the data models. Till now, we have built the schema for this particular project. If you have not watched my previous videos where we have done this setup, then I would recommend watching those first before continuing from this particular video. If you find this content helpful, then please don't forget to like the videos and subscribe to my channel. Now, without further ado, let's get started. Now, like I was saying before, that in real world projects, we just don't write SQL randomly. We need a structure, and that is what is baked into this dbt_project.yaml file. This is a mandatory file for all DBT projects. If I give you .sql extension, then you would know that this is an SQL file. If I give you .py extension, then you would know that this is a Python file. Similarly, how would you know that something is a DBT project? So you would look for this dbt_project.yaml file. Whatever is the parent directory for this file, that will be your DBT project. So you look for this particular file, and whatever is the parent directory, that defines your DBT project workspace. So if we come back to our example here, this is our dbt_project.yaml file. It got automatically installed when we did dbt init. So the parent directory to this file is this dbt_HR analytics. And if you remember, when we were configuring the DBT, that time DBT asked us what is the project name that you want to give, and we gave this particular name. That's why we can confidently say that this is our DBT project workspace. Now this dbt_YAML file, it connects everything, starting from models to tests to snapshots, seed files, everything, so that our raw data is transformed into data models, which are analytics ready. Now that we have understood why this file is so important, let us look at the different components which are there in this particular file. Now I will move to our project screen, and here in my VS Code, let's open the dbt_project.yaml file to go over the different components that are listed in this file. I had to turn off my DBT for Pro users extension because this dbt_project.yaml file was all showing red lines. So what I did was I just went into this extensions area, searched for the DBT power user for dbt extension, and I have just disabled it for now. We don't need it for dbt underscore project.yaml explanation, so I'm just gonna keep it like that. I think it has to do something with some setting and I'm not able to figure it out, so I have just disabled it. If you know about that setting, please put your suggestion in the comment below. I would love to fix it for my setup as well. But anyways, let's start with dbt underscore project.yaml explanation. So the first thing that you see over here is the name. This is the name of the project that you defined when you did dbt init. At that time you were asked what is the name of the dbt project, and this folder is also created using the same name that you provided over there, dbt underscore underscore hr underscore analytics. So these names, they match, and that's how dbt knows what my directory is where dbt project is present. Then comes the config version. This is always set to 2, and the reason for that is because previously dbt was using a different version of YAML, like a different way to structure YAML, but then they shifted to this version number 2, and that's why we always have to use config version 2, so that dbt points to this new way of working with YAML. Then version 1.0.0, this is going to help you in your CI/CD because you're defining what version is currently there for your dbt project. So when you will be, let's say, deploying this one, and then later on you make some changes, then you can change the version depending on how you want to structure it. You want to change this main version or have some small fixes. So you change the version, and when you do the next deployment, you know that this is a new version and you can roll back changes easily. So this helps you in your CI/CD operations. Next is profile. So for profile, we have dbt underscore underscore hr underscore analytics. So this is the profile that you created in your profiles.yaml file when you were again doing the dbt init configuration and setting up connection between dbt and Snowflake. So if you remember my previous explanation about profiles.yaml file, it contains the connection details between dbt and Snowflake. So there could be multiple setups that you could have done, like you have changed some passwords, you have changed some settings, and that's why you had to reconfigure that file. So there could be multiple profiles present in that particular profile.yaml. So the profile that we want to use for this particular dbt project is dbt underscore underscore hr underscore analytics profile. So always check if you have any authentication errors, then probably something is wrong in the profile that dbt is using. So you will have to go there and update it. So this is that particular profile. Now there will be lots of files that we will be creating. Something for models, a file for writing tests, a file for seed file, a file for writing macros, a file for creating snapshots. I know you don't understand what is a model or what's the difference between seed and macro or snapshot. These will come later on in the upcoming videos. But for now, understand that we will be creating different files for different things. Now, how will dbt know that where to look for test files or where to look for snapshot files? So this is the place where you define and tell dbt that, hey, for model paths or for finding my models, you need to go into my models directory. For analysis paths, you need to go into my analysis directory, and you can see all of these directories on the left hand side. For my test paths, to find the test files that I have created, you need to go in my test directory because I'm telling you this is the path that you need to take. Then for finding my seed files, you need to go into the seeds directory because I have defined my seed paths as seeds. Similarly, for macros, we have to go into this macros directory. So dbt can look for macros in this macros directory. And similarly, for snapshots, you have to go into this snapshots directory. So this is how dbt will know what type of file exists where in your dbt project. Now you might have a question that what if I don't want to use models directory and I want to choose my own name? Is there a way we can do this? Yes, that's possible. And to do that, you can just create a new folder in this particular dbt project. So I'm going to call it my models, and I want dbt to look into models, to look for model files in this particular directory. So to do that, I'm just going to update this model paths to my models. So now when dbt comes over here, it will know that my model path is this my-models directory, and I have to go here and look for those files. Now always remember that this path should be relative path to dbt underscore project.yaml file. So all of these paths, they are relative paths. These should not be absolute paths. So this is all about the paths that you define, and always remember, you have to, if you're confused where you should place your test files or where you should place your snapshot files, you just come into this dbt underscore project.yaml file and see what is the path that you have defined over here and just use that. Next is this clean targets. So there is a command in dbt called as dbt clean. You run this in terminal. Now, as the name suggests, this is for doing some cleanup work. So when you run this command, some specific directories will get removed from your dbt project. So here you define what you want to clean up. Usually the things that we need to clean up are the compiled files, logs, and installed packages. So these are commonly used cleanup directories. So here we can define, when we run the dbt clean command, then what we need to clean up. So for this particular project, I have defined that there is a folder called target. It is not present over here, but when we will be running dbt, then it will get created automatically. So I want that whenever I run dbt clean command, I delete this particular or remove this particular project, folder or directory. And I also want dbt underscore packages directory to be removed. So this is just to do some cleanup, because we don't want logs or anything to be kept for too long. So when we run this command, these get removed from our project. Now there is also another optional command which is called as docs-paths, and as the name suggests, this is where dbt is going to look for documentation. Now it is generally recommended that we do not apply this unless we have proper documentation added into this particular directory. So if we don't provide this configuration, then in that case, dbt is going to look into all of these folders to get an understanding of what documentation is from the description and commands which are present in all of these folders. So it's going to give us extensive documentation from these particular folders, from all of these folders. So if you want this kind of behavior, that dbt should go into each of these folders and get documentation from there, then you should omit this particular configuration. Otherwise, if you provide this configuration, then dbt is only just going to go into this particular folder and look for documentation. So it is up to you, how do you structure your documentation and your project. For our project, I want dbt to go into all of these folders to get the documentation. So I'm going to be removing this particular setting. Now there is another configuration that you should know, which is around function paths. So in dbt, you can define your own functions, which are commonly called as user defined functions or UDFs. And when you do that, you can just define those functions in a directory called as functions, and you don't have to define this particular configuration, because by default dbt is going to go into a functions directory, directory called as functions to look for UDFs. But let's say that you want to define your UDFs in a separate folder. Let's say it is called as UDF functions. Then you can write that particular directory name over here and create that directory over here. So we will do UDF functions. So like you can observe over here, I am giving relative path for this particular folder and relative to this dbt underscore project.yaml file. So you just have to provide this configuration, and now when dbt has to look for user defined functions, then it's going to go into this UDF-functions directory. Now I don't want to define this because I want dbt to go directly into functions folder to look for user defined function. So that's why I'm just omitting this. So this is an optional setup again, but this is something that you should know of. Now we can define some resource specific configurations, and these are defined as, let's say we want to define some configurations for models. So we have models here, and then we provide the resource type. So like in this dbt underscore HR analytics, we have, if you go into models, we have this example folder or examples directory. So in this examples directory, we are saying that it should be materialized as view. Whatever we have in this directory, it should be built as view. So there are lots of configurations that we can do related to models, seeds, snapshots, etc. And we can define them in a similar manner. Now, I am keeping this very short right now because I will be explaining this in depth when we will be creating models and we will need to update some setup or configuration for models. So we will go into depth over there. But for now, you just need to remember that you can define some resource specific. So models, snapshots, seeds, these are all resources. So resource specific configuration can also be defined. And this is the place where to define those global settings. Now don't worry about all of these comments because we will be going into what is a config file and how do we define or override these particular configurations, etc. later on. But remember that in these models, we can define the global behavior that these models should follow. There are a lot of other settings or configurations that we can do in this dbt_project.yaml file because like I said, this is the blueprint for your dbt project and you can go as detailed as you like here. But for now, we are sticking to just these configurations and we can build on top of these configurations as we go later. But these are the basic configurations or basic items in the dbt_project.yaml file that you should know of. I hope I was able to give you a clear explanation of what is a dbt_project.yaml file, why do we need it, and why is it important, and how to define all the configurations and setup of this particular file. If you have any questions or if I have left something out from this particular explanation, then please let me know and I would be happy to create a video around it. Thank you for watching. I will see you in my next one.